finally have Big Ten football. All right, Saturday night's a huge one in Minneapolis with the Golden Gophers hosting the Maize and Blue of Michigan. We got Daniel House on the line from GophersGuru.com. I please encourage you to head on over there to check out his Minnesota football coverage. You just get a slice right here every couple weeks, and it's exceptional. So please head on over to Gophers Guru. Daniel, how you doing today?
Doing well. Everyone's excited up here. The Vikings aren't playing well, so it's like, Gophers, come save the sports market. Be really good this year.
Absolutely. And talking about historic events, achievements, legacy in Minneapolis and Minnesota sports, Sid Hartman, after 100 years of life. So it's a sad day, but at the same time, a day to celebrate the life of this legacy of this journalist. Give us some background on one Sid Hartman.
Sid Hartman, a legend in Minnesota. You think of a few names: Kirby Puckett, Sid Hartman, Prince in Minnesota. Sid is up in that category. Every event you went to, this guy was there up until the day that he passed away. He had 21,000 bylines. So he started in the paper when he was a young kid. And I just was amazed when I went to events because I grew up watching and reading all the stuff that Sid Hartman had in the Twin Cities market with the Star Tribune. And then to be able to just be around him and see what he did at such an old age. And he always talked about this being his passion, and he never worked a day in his life. So I always admired that, his work ethic, tenacity, some of the moments that we had up in the press box. And every day every game, I'd always get greeted by Sid, and he'd just yell, "Hey, kid." And then he'd comment on my bow tie. And I remember one of the big thrills for me was when in 2018, I wrote a Gopher football guide, and part of the proceeds went to the Leukemia Society of Minnesota. Open my email up, and I see Sid Hartman, and he bought my book. I just thought that was the coolest thing ever because I always looked up to Sid, and he's just a legend in this market. And for him to buy my book, that was just one of my favorite Sid memories.
Everybody watch the video here. Then directly after that, Google Sid Hartman and get yourself an education on sports journalism, and specifically there in the great state of Minnesota. All right. PJ Fleck may elevate to those standards someday if he has a long tenure at Minnesota and continues to post the 11-2 kind of years. And of course, Tanner Morgan has his opportunity to make his mark on Minnesota, and already certainly has in Minnesota football lore. So we've got Tanner Morgan against a Michigan defense that's always a top 10 unit under Jim Harbaugh. So let's start off with that matchup. Dax Hill's one of the best secondary players in the nation, but pretty much a revamped Michigan secondary other than that, although the defensive line comes back intact.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about the secondary specifically. You talked about Dax Hill. I think he's one of the top players in the country in terms of versatility. Did they use him like Tyrann Mathieu and get super creative with his skill set? Don Brown, one of the most aggressive and creative defensive coordinators in the country. So the Gophers are going to have to be ready for a lot of different things. But there are question marks with Vincent Gray being the primary starting cornerback. Who's opposite of him? You look at Sammy Foston being converted from safety to corner. Is he the guy that starts next to him? Jamon Green, a junior. Jalen Perry, a sophomore. DJ Turner, a sophomore. A lot of inexperienced players opposite of Vince Gray at cornerback. So you see wide receiver 2, Chris Ottman-Bell, possibly having a big game in this one. I'm looking at the Gophers' passing attack against a secondary that might be a work in progress. And Michigan's X factors, that defensive front, Kwity Paye, Aiden Hutchinson on the edges. Kwity Paye can kick inside. He's one of the most athletic players in the country, going to be coveted by NFL teams. So Minnesota's offensive line versus that defensive front. And then you look at the second level of Michigan's defense. I like some of the athleticism they have in there. Ben Van Sumeren, a linebacker that is super athletic, could burst onto the scene this year. And Michigan was kind of rocked by cornerback Ambry Thomas not coming back. He decided to opt out. That's another big hole in their defense. So figuring out that cornerback 2 spot, looking at their defense being led in the second level by Cam McGrone too, the Mike linebacker. He's the heartbeat of that group. They have a lot of athleticism and creative skill sets, but how fast is it going to come together? I think Minnesota's catching them at a good time when they're trying to fill a lot of holes.
The best friend of any secondary, especially an inexperienced one, would, of course, be the pass rush, and Kwity Paye in particular at 19 tackles for loss with sacks included, and a ton of production back along that Michigan front. So that turns our attention toward the Minnesota offensive line. Do you think they're well equipped to take on one of the better defensive fronts in the Big Ten?
I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with Minnesota's offensive line, especially with the front that Michigan has, but the continuity coming back for the group with the Gophers this year. Sam Schluter, one of the more improved players on the offense last year at left tackle. John Michael Schmidt's a center who I believe is one of the best young centers in the Big Ten, could be a potential NFL player. Conor Olson has shown his versatility in the past, being able to play both guard spots, and Blaise Andries, obviously the guy that can do it all for the group. He played tackle, he played guard. He's able to be kind of that Mr. Versatile of the group, and he isn't talked about enough. The Gophers have NFL caliber talent on their offensive line and continuity coming back, so that's definitely something that I'm looking forward to seeing in this game.
For Minnesota football coverage, join Daniel over on gophersguru.com. Also, we posted a video with Daniel last week breaking down Minnesota personnel, both sides of the football and special teams included, which, of course, included the matchup of the Gophers defense losing 7 starters. Antoine Winfield's the headliner, of course, against Joe Milton. So, Joe Milton, you've got a dichotomy of quarterback storylines. You got that stable KG veteran in Tanner Morgan, 30 TDs, 7 picks. Joe Milton, an unproven commodity, athletic guy, highly recruited, of course, and decorated coming out of high school, who won the job apparently over Dylan McCaffrey. Going to play not necessarily in the typical hostile environment, but still a road test, first start. What can Minnesota do to make him uncomfortable?
Well, I think that's the biggest challenge, Mark, because you don't have a lot of film on Joe Milton. And PJ Fleck was talking with us this morning, and he said there's not a lot of data points and film to go back and look at Joe Milton. They were going to his high school stuff and even looking at that to try to get a sense of what this guy can do. He had high praise for Joe Milton, said he's one of those once-in-a-decade type of players that come through a program. Just was shouting praise about Joe Milton. I believe the interesting thing to watch is how's Gaddis going to use him in the offensive system. His athletic skill set, are you getting a lot of design runs like in a Cam Newton-esque type of offense with some of those looks? And then he's a big arm guy. You look at the targets that they're going to be losing. They're losing 58% of their offensive production. Doesn't sound like Nico Collins is going to be back. So you're looking at, Ronnie Bell being a guy that they're going to rely on significantly. They don't have a receiver over 6 feet tall, which is interesting. Cornelius Johnson, 6'3" target. Kind of a shift in approach, because last year you had those big-bodied perimeter possession receivers with like Tariq Black and Donovan Peoples-Jones. Now you're shifting to the Giles Jackson, Ronnie Bell, and then your Cornelius Johnson being your big possession receiver. So they're going to be a shifty type of explosive wide receiver group, and with Joe Milton's skill set, how do they maximize it? PJ Fleck always likes to say, sometimes you just got to prepare for ghosts in the first couple of games, because you don't exactly know what these teams are going to be throwing at you, and it's all about offensive and defensive adjustments. So without film and a talented guy like Joe Milton, it's a challenge for the Gophers. I think it's one of the storylines heading into the game. How are they able to adapt and adjust to the things that they're doing?
Tariq Black was a huge recruit. We see him now on the field for Texas after catching 25 passes at Michigan last year. Never really fulfilled his potential with the maize and blue. As Daniel points out, Ronnie Bell's coming back with 48 catches. So he was the leading receiver, but the guy that made the big chunk plays was Nico Collins at 20 yards per reception and 7 touchdowns. He's opted out. When we look at the run defense for the Gophers against this Minnesota rushing attack that it should be much more fortified than it was at this point last year. They were very thin at running back at this point last year, but now Zach Charbonnet, Hassan Haskins have a full year under their belt. Chris Evans is back. True Wilson had a nice season at 5 yards per carry for Michigan last year. So how do you think Minnesota matches up in run defense?
Well, I actually just posted a piece on Gophers Guru today talking about the rush defense and how they need to create more negative plays, because last year their stuff rate was one of the worst in college football last year, right at the bottom. So stuff rate's basically plays where a running back is stopped at or behind the line of scrimmage. Gophers didn't put offenses enough in negative play situations, long down and distances. Your whole scheme opens up then. So that's one of the things that I'm looking for, is increasing that rush defense efficiency just a little bit, getting to the point where your defensive line is taking over the game. And the Gophers, I've said it before, the blitzing last year was a big reason why they were so successful. They were able to maximize, blitzing on a quarter of their snaps and then getting pressure on over 50% of those dropbacks. So for me, it comes back to the D-line has to assert itself against Michigan. You look at what they're losing 4 key starters up front, including Cesar Ruiz, who was the anchor of that group, the intelligent player, the guy that really had that blocking scheme ticking. Jalen Mayfield gets the waiver from the NCAA to come back playing right tackle. He had 13 starts last year. But I'm looking at the matchup on the left side. Ryan Hayes making his 3rd career start against Minnesota. Prime time. You've got Asezi Otomoeo and Boye Mafe, 2 pass rushers that I think could burst onto the scene this year. Could be one of the better underrated pass rushing duos in college football, in the Big Ten specifically. Keep an eye on Boye and Asezi. That's the matchup I'm watching against an inexperienced offensive line. Do you run a lot of stunts and twists to get that communication off kilter, throw some looks at that group that maybe they haven't witnessed yet? Joe Rossi is got to be really excited about what he can do from a creative standpoint to put stress on an inexperienced offensive line early in the season.
Jim Harbaugh's record against ranked teams at Michigan on the road, less than impressive. Of course, a night game on ABC, 7:30 Eastern time, 6:30 local in Minneapolis. And if it comes down to a kick, Michael Lance back, I would believe, 8 of 11 last year.
Yeah, Michael Lance, he missed a little bit of portion of the end of the last season, and Brock Walker was kicking for a while, but I'm anticipating Michael Lance. We haven't had an opportunity to see any practices, obviously, due to COVID, so we're all going to be wondering what's going on, who's going to be the punter. They picked up a transfer, Stevenson. It could be a punter, but I'm also looking at Mark Crawford, the Australian punter. They went over to Australia, picked up a big leg guy who came out of the Australian developmental track system, Aussie-style type of guy. Got to see him punt once at a practice right before COVID started, and it was the big deal. Everyone was hyped about the punter, and PJ Fleck was even talking about it once. He's like, everyone is going to be excited about the Australian punter. So keep an eye on that if he is indeed the guy that gets the job.
Daniel, if you weren't able to watch the game and we handed you a box score and took away the score of the final and handed you the box score to determine who won this game, of course, we can always go to red zone efficiency, offense and defense, turnovers. The turnover battle almost is like an 85% certainty of who's going to win the game. But going off a little off the radar, if you were looking at a box score, what are going to be those keys for you in determining who pulls this one out?
Well, I think it's all about a few things. I think it's eliminating negative plays. You want to stay on schedule, stay on script. I wrote about success rates, which is the thing that I look at consistently. So you want to pick up 50% of your yardage on first down. And I didn't think the Gophers were particularly great last year with their first down success rate. So getting better in that category, then getting to the point where you're getting to second down, you're getting 70% of your yardage. Third and fourth down, you're converting 100%. So I'm looking at that success rate being over 45% each game. That's kind of the spot that the Gophers were really successful last year in those types of games. I think turnovers, like you said, are the thing that change the entire landscape of the game, because a flip in field position, a quick score by the opposing offense, it's always going to alter the game when you're looking at things like expected points added, stuff like that. Turnovers, in-game decision-making, maybe you decide to kick a long field goal versus going for it, or you punt the ball away and you flip the field, those types of things. I'm always looking at the negative plays, the in-game management, and then the success rates. Those are a few things that always seem to decide the game. Like I always use the example of Minnesota's game last year against Iowa. If you went and looked at that advanced box score, you would be amazed that Minnesota lost that football game. But it came back to a couple defining plays. I've always said I believe football, it's 3 to 4 plays a game that can change the whole outcome. You make one mistake, a turnover, a pick six, it can just mess with the whole flow of the game. And it's evidenced by some of these new metrics that you're using to assess performance, like expected points added and things like that?
Minnesota has already had an offense that is established, right? Rashad Bateman and Tanner Morgan have a great connection there. So I believe that's something that is already established. We know what to expect from them. What we don't know what to expect is from their defense. They have to replace, I believe, 7 different starters on defense. So we'll see how that shakes up. But on the other side, Michigan has to replace some starters on the offensive side. So Joe Milton, is he the guy? Like we said in the beginning, will he finally be the one quarterback that Jim Harbaugh has developed and becomes, a top quarterback in the Big Ten and maybe in the country? Will that offensive line be up to snuff for a solid running back room? So I believe that it's Michigan has more question marks than Minnesota to me at the moment. So we'll see. A lot of people have Michigan favored by a couple points at this point, but it'll be interesting to see them go at night into TCF Bank Stadium. Even without fans, it's still a big environment for a first-year quarterback like Joe Milton to come in, and he needs to come in and be comfortable and really see some success early in that game for him to be set up for a possible win for that game and going forward in the future of the season.
Yeah, there's certainly a contrast in storylines at quarterback when you look at Joe Milton and all the unexpected element there with him versus Tanner Morgan. Not necessarily Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields, but a notch below in regards to a 30-7 touchdown to pick ratio, a very stable influence on that Minnesota offense, and a Gopher brand that brings back Rashad Bateman to test that secondary who had opted out. He had 60 catches and 11 touchdowns last year. But as you mentioned, a lot of shakeup on the defense, in particular, Antoine Winfield, one of the better defensive backs in the country, gone to the NFL. All right, Justin, we appreciate you stopping by. Please check out Justin's work. You can just follow him right there. There's his Twitter handle, JustinRowe92. And Justin, we appreciate you stopping by and laying down the insight and the information regarding Michigan football.